Hey curators, welcome back for another episode of the Yarn Curator podcast. My name is Naomi. I have 2 dogs. The neighbors are getting their lawn done. Welcome back for another episode. We're starting off with a bang. If you're a new viewer, thank you so much for watching. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. And I guess like everyone else on YouTube, this is another channel all about what I've been knitting and making and all of that good stuff. So we'll jump right in. It's been about a month since the last time I sat down to film, in which I had all of the finished objects. Now I have all of the works in progress. So through most of 2022, I feel like my knitting mojo was all over the place, and towards the end of the year last year, I didn't really know what I wanted to work on, so I just worked on pretty much finishing all of my WIPS, which you guys saw most of those that became finished objects in my last episode, except for one. And this is a hat that I finished making last year, and it's just a simple 1x1 rib with a really long brim. It was supposed to be the Thunderstorm toque by Abby Knits, and when it came time to start doing the pattern, I didn't feel like it, so I just kept knitting good old 1x1 rib to make a nice little beanie. And when I got to the crown, I just kind of fudged it, which makes me a knitwear designer, right? Right? That makes me a designer. So I will take my headband off real quick. It is a little bit tight, which is impressive considering this head of hair. I believe I knit this on size 5, US 5 needles. I don't know what that is in metric. It's got this really long brim, so you can fold it double. And check out my dome piece with the 1x1 rib. And I can just adjust this however it needs to be done to cover my ears. I got some extra ear warming with the hair underneath there. So yeah, this is my finished hat. It's knit out of, I believe, Madeline Tosh yarn. The colorway, I don't know. I bought it off of a Ravelry D-stash, and I made my Ingalls sweater out of it, and this was what I had left over from knitting that sweater. And the yarn may or may not even be Mad Tosh, because when it arrived at my home, it didn't have the yarn bands on it. It was all just completely unlabeled. So I may have got had. I really don't think I did, which it's fine. It's a beautiful pinky purple color. And yeah, I feel like I am just ready to tackle the world of knitwear design, having now made this one pattern all on my own, just totally 100% me, minus the fact that I cast on the required number of stitches for someone else's pattern and followed half of their pattern, and then followed a different pattern kind of to do the crown decreases. That makes me a knitwear designer, right? Right? I'm totally kidding you guys. I'm not serious, and my brain does not compute along those lines. So basically what I did for the crown was I followed Lavanya Patricilla. She has her Standing Rock hat, which was a free pattern she published to raise awareness for Standing Rock, that community, when all of the protests were taking place 5 or 6 years ago about the water rights on the reservation. Sorry. And bing bong. And I thought I was going to be able to follow that like 100% to a T, because I have knit that pattern in the past. It's a worsted weight hat pattern. Except that hat is a 2x2 rib and not a 1x1 rib. So what I ended up doing was, I think I knit 2 together, purl 2 together across the row, and then I did a non-decrease row, keeping the knit purl pattern. And then I believe, so that's what it looks like. I mean, it turned out pretty good for just kind of fudging it to try and keep evenly decreasing. And then, I don't know, I did it till I had like 6 or 7, 8 stitches left, and then tied it all together. So yeah, this is my finished hat. I like it. It'll be good for in March. I know Zoe, my sister Zoe, if you're watching, mentioned this on her last podcast episode. We are taking a family trip to Iceland in March. I am so sorry. My neighbor, who doesn't even live at this home, is having their lawn done. My neighbor who lived there before, he passed away suddenly, and unfortunately, he actually had a heart attack while he was on a plane. Anyways, his daughter inherited the house, and her husband were living in it for a while. And then one day out of the blue, they just moved out, and like they haven't sold the home. It's half renovated. I don't think they got permits for a lot of the work that they were doing, and that's probably why they left. And according to one of my other neighbors, there used to be 3 cars parked in the side of the yard. And according to my other neighbor, they were like getting fined for having these cars parked in the grass because it's against city code. And then one day the cars disappeared. Anyways, all of this is to say, her and her family don't live there anymore. And randomly they have a yard service come and do their yard. But like, it's not like on a regular schedule, or if it is, I can't tell what it is. Anyways, this is my finished object and totally a knitwear designer. So with that, we'll jump into works in progress. I've kind of been working primarily on one thing monogamously, but I'm going to jump into smaller WIPs first, and then I'll talk about the biggin. So because I've finished pretty much all but 2 WIPs, I have a pair of mittens that are lingering, and really I want to frog those and start over. I'm going to frog my yell, and aside from those 2 projects, those are it for WIPs from years past. Like I said, I really did a good job clearing the needles. And so first up on the fresh WIP is my pressed flowers shawl. And as you can tell, there's not much here to it. This is a pattern that should be recognizable to most. It's by Amy Christoffers, I believe. And I have knit the setup rows to get going on the pattern. And I can't decide if I like it or not, and I'm not sure I love this particular yarn in this particular pattern. So here, I'll let you guys take a look at it. So this is what I have done so far, and it feels really dense, and I don't love it so far. So for the yarn I'm using 2 skeins. So this first ball of yarn, the darker purple, is from a small breed farmer producer shepherd called Hawkshaw Sheep, and I actually bought this at Edinburgh Yarn Festival in 2019 when I was fortunate enough to attend, and Zoe and I went on the Sunday event. It was like dedicated to small like heritage sheep breeds in Scotland. Like a lot of the vendors there had more traditional sheep breeds. So I picked up this ball of yarn, and I thought I had the label here in the ball in my bag, but I don't. So anyways, so I bought 2 skeins of this originally to make the Zora cardigan by Ahura Knits, I believe. And I never found a contrast color that I really liked to go with this. And so yeah, it's been sitting in my stash, and I've been waiting for the right project to come along. The other yarn that I'm using is Harrisville Designs in their Daylights, and it's the color that has little bits of purple speckled in with it. And so they're both DK weight. They're both pretty close in terms of like they're both spun pretty similarly. This darker purple's a little bit toothier than the Harrisville Designs. And yeah, I've been eyeing these and my nightshades together. Like in my stash, I've had this plus the dark purple nightshades I have left over from the Jen Steingass test knit that I did last year, 2 years ago, whenever I did it. And I've been thinking they would make a great project together. And I've been wanting to knit a shawl, and I've been wanting to knit this particular shawl for a while. And this was really the only yarn combination in my stash that would work with this pattern. I really want to make the cardigan version kind of more than the shawl. I'd rather have the pressed flowers cardigan. However, I don't have enough of a main color to make that. So anyways, all of that is to say, I was like, well, Naomi, you've been eyeing this pattern forever. You've been eyeing this yarn forever. Why don't you go ahead and cast them on? And so this is as far as I've gotten. Like I said, I'm not sure if I love these two yarns together. And then the other thing is, like, I'm not sure I really enjoy knitting this pattern. And I think that's because it requires more than 4 brain cells. You really have to pay attention. At least I think it'll go easier once I get further into the pattern, but where I am right now requires more attention and mental space than I have time to give. And so that's kind of why it's just been sitting in the project bag ever since I cast on. I mean, that's an evening's worth of knitting. I won't feel bad if I rip it out and decide to do it out of a different yarn. I also wouldn't mind knitting this particular pattern out of a DK Weight superwash yarn, because both of these are non-superwash and they're a little bit scratchier. So since it's going to be up around my neck, I might just want that little bit of softness against my throat. I love a good non-superwash, don't get me wrong, no shade. All the yarn you're going to see in today's knitting content is non-superwash. So don't think it's any shade towards non-superwash. The other WIP is one that I cast on. I mean, I successfully cast it on last night. I cast it on a couple days ago, but I've ripped it out a few times and started over. So this is the wee baby beginning of, I believe the pattern is called the Scout Shawl. Designer unknown off the top of my head. It'll be on the screen. And if I didn't have any brain cells for my pressed flowers, I definitely have 0 brain cells for this shawl. As you can see, it's got yarn hanging on bobbins off of it. So this shawl is knit, it's color work knit flat with intarsia, because I hate myself. So as you can see here, this is the wee baby beginning of it. If I can get my camera to focus. So I cast this on a couple times because your girl read the directions wrong. And originally I had, this is color 2. No, yes. And I thought color 2 was the border color. It's not, color 1 is. And originally when I laid this out, this light blue was going to be color 1 with the way the pattern has them assigned. And so how I originally had things picked out, I was thinking it was going to be a cream border. And then I was wrong. And I was like, well, that sucks. Because this pattern has you cake the yarn off into smaller balls. As you can see here, I'll show you my color palette. Little show and tell time. This is my color palette here. If I can get all paint with all the colors of the moon. So bravo, Naomi, good job. Okay. Downside of yarn bobbins, very hard to show off. So we got mint, we got purple, we got cream, we got dark purple, we got dark green, And so when I was originally thinking that my yarn was supposed to be, that this was going to be the border color, which is why you wind it off into 3 smaller balls because you're working that along the border the whole time. So I did that, and then I was like, well, crap, I'm wrong. And what I needed to do was actually to wind off how I originally had this laid out. This minty color should have been wound off into 3 smaller balls. But I came home from work and was like, I got this. I finally figured it out after like 3 days of thinking about it. And then I wound off the lavender color onto bobbins. And I have since run out of things to wind yarn bobbins onto. So we're mixing it up. It's a little bit different than I had originally laid it out in my brains, but it's all good. So, as you can see, I have wound yarn off onto these 2 yarn bobbins that came with a bat that I purchased from Spinning Mermaids. I actually might have added these to my cart to get free shipping. Can't quite remember. So I have 2 like actual dedicated yarn bobbins here. And then because your girl's a cheap bitch on a budget, I used binder clips to make the other yarn bobbins. Really easy. You just thread the yarn through here when it's in the up, like high 5 position, and then you flip the flappy flaps down, you open the binder clip, you clip the thread inside like this bit in here to secure it, and then you flip them back up and wind yarn, and Bob's your uncle, you got yarn bobbins. So, and the pattern tells you for the contrast sections to pick like a light and a dark of the same color family, and then a neutral. Light green and dark green, light purple and dark purple, and then you can see that kind of oatmeal color in there. So last night I cast this on for the 30th time and went going. I was, for the longest time, I like stared at the charts. I tried to figure out like where the repeat started and ended to see if I could just knit it in the round in a tube to eliminate both intarsia and color work flat. But as you can see from the pattern, so one of the things that I really like about the pattern that you can see is that it's designed to mimic quilt block squares. And so there's rows where you're actually working 2 different color work charts at the same time. So if I were to convert this in the round, I would still need to do intarsia, I think, to be able to work those 2 charted segments. Otherwise, I would have to be carrying the yarns for the different color work parts of the pattern like across the whole row. So I wasn't eliminating anything if I wanted to keep that design feature, which is one of the things that I really like about the pattern. I also really like the shape of this shawl, and so I decided to suck it up, and I'm gonna have to use brain cells that I think have left my body. Like, I think they're just gone. Like, they burned themselves up. Like, mentally an atomic bomb went off and I have no more brain cells for when I talk to you about my, like, big whip, my monogamous whip. Sorry. Like I said, my brain cells are gone. So, this is what I've done so far. As you can tell, this is very low contrast in here, which is fine. If I would have done it how I originally had the colors picked out, it would have been flip-flop. The mint would be on the outside with the lavender and the cream going off of each other. And this is showing up much more kind of like neon ice blue. It's more like a minty blue in person, minty green. But on the whole, now that I've got a little bit more width established, it's a lot easier. It's a little bit less fiddly. And I've got a pretty good system for rotating the yarn on my lap while I work on it. That being said, this is not a very travel-friendly project. I know at one point last night, John called and asked me for help with something, and I was like, you're gonna have to wait till I finish this row. and he kind of gave me like some attitude back, and I was like, listen bro, I got 5 balls of yarn going at the same time, you're gonna have to wait. And then he piped down after that. So I'm just gonna gently place this all back in the project bag, and when I go to pick this up to knit later on this evening, I'm gonna hate current Naomi. Future Naomi already knows she's gonna hate past Naomi, and present Naomi doesn't care. So last but not least, like I said, I've kind of had a monogamous project. Monogamous. It's a WIP. You're welcome. And I'm sorry. So this is the Cozy Hoodie, designer unknown off the top of my head. You would think I would write all this down before I film, but nah. And I first saw this project on Maggie, who has the Sonder Knitting podcast. She was making one, and I've not stopped thinking about it since I saw it on her channel a few months ago. And I am knitting this out of the Fiber Company's Cumbria base. It's like a Masham mohair something else blend, and this is the colorway I'm knitting it out of. It's this really deep black, green, blue, teal color. Kind of a real inky, like it reminds me of when you see ink in a fountain pen or a ballpoint pen. That's what it really reminds me of. And originally I had purchased 2 balls of this yarn to use as a contrast color in a different pattern. And it's been sitting in my stash because I needed to buy the main color for that pattern and I didn't have it. But I kept thinking about this, and once again, I've really been trying to knit from stash, not for any particular reason, but I have yarn here. You know, I don't need to buy new yarn. Y'all don't need my justifications. I got the yarn, kind of. So anyways, this yarn has been in my stash, and I was looking at it, and this pattern calls for worsted weight. This is the only worsted weight. I lied. I have a sweater's quantity of worsted weight in my stash, but I didn't want this pattern in that yarn. So this was one of 2 worsted weights in my stash that would work for this pattern. So what I ended up doing was ordering 4 or 5 more balls based on the yardage. So I went ahead and cast on the project and like ordered the yarn at the same time. The yarn took for frickin' ever to arrive here. So anyways, so you cast this on at the hood, and you start with like this top section of the hood, and the whole hood used almost a ball of yarn. So then I was getting nervous that the new yarn wouldn't arrive in time and I would lose steam. Well, I lost steam, kind of, but I mean, I was finishing other projects by the time the other yarn came. And so for Christmas, John and I took the dog up to North Carolina to spend Christmas with our family up there. And so this was going to be my travel knitting in the car. And I had knit pretty much the entire hood. And this whole thing is knit in the round and joined. And so I don't know if you can see here. Here is the front. Here's the front of the hoodie. And basically you join these 2 sides, like you knit these 2 edges together. So you sandwich them and then you pick up along the edge and you join to work in the round, and you begin your raglan increases. I don't know if it was because it was the holidays or because it was the holidays plus like just being like towards knitting, or if it was that and like the holidays in something else. But like, y'all, I am telling you it, and because I think I went like a month in between casting this on and like knitting steady on it and then coming back to that join. But like this is like actual footage of what my brain was like working on this project. Like, I don't know what was going on, but like remembering where I was in the stitch pattern, which isn't even that hard once you get the hang of it, like it just like literally would not compute. So in the entire 14-hour drive from Florida to North Carolina, and then the entire 13-hour drive home, plus the 4 days we were at my parents', do you know how many rows I knit on this? Three. I knit 3 whole rows, and that includes knitting a row, tinking back, re-knitting the row, re-tinking it, and then knitting it again. So maybe I knit 5 if you want to count it that way. But yeah, and so I was like, you know what? I don't got the brain space for this, for everything that's going on. I'm just going to wait till we get home and I'm home alone and I've got the day to woo-saw, figure it the fuck out. Which I did. And part of the original frustration is when I tinked back the first time, I think I dropped a stitch. I figured it out. I know I messed up tinking it. So let me take that back. The first time I knit the row, I knit the stitch pattern wrong because I read the directions wrong because I was in a moving car. So I decided to tink it. And then when I tinked it, I think I either tinked 1 stitch too far back or I dropped a stitch or added a stitch. When I finally figured out what was going on, which is that my stitch count was off, and since my stitch count was off, I needed to figure out where I could either add or decrease a stitch to keep the stitch pattern as it is in the pattern. And I did that. I don't know if you can see it here. So yeah, it's this beautiful seed stitch rib, as you can see. And so I just needed to figure out where I could fudge it in the join so I could keep working. And then, yeah, then it's just a really simple raglan after that. And so she has it written in the pattern when you do the raglan increases, you'll either be making one right or left. And depending on where you are in the stitch pattern, you would make one right or left, like a knit or a purl. I abandoned those instructions. All of my increases are a knit stitch and I just compensated for it on the following row to follow the stitch pattern because that is mentally all I could do, and I couldn't figure out reading the knitting whether it needed to be a knit or a purl increased, and I didn't think it was that big of a difference. Like, I don't think you can tell design wise that I did not follow that feature because it's seed stitch, so the next row under it you're going to do the opposite. So I winged it, I figured it out. That's all that matters. So then I knit the entire body and we bound off the body. Now she just needs sleeves. And I think they'll go really fast because, like I said, this is worsted weight yarn and I would really like to have this cozy hoodie for our upcoming trip. I do have to say I've cracked up when I've tried, sorry, mohair. I do have to say I have cracked up like every time I have tried on this sweater because it reminds me of like a knight with chainmail that they used to wear. Like, you guys can't tell me that they're not the same. Spot the difference in this picture. You can't. They're exactly the same. But yeah, I would say this has been a challenging knit, but also engaging. And once you get the hang of the seed stitch rib, it's pretty intuitive. It's just remembering where you are in that process. And yeah, it probably didn't help that I was knitting this through the holidays, through a lot of different things going on at work. And so, yeah, but on the whole, I'm really pleased with how this came out. So, and you can kind of really see the color, the sheen of it, and you see that little fuzz, that's the mohair in it. I want to subject you guys to a repeat performance of my last episode. So in addition to knitting, I also warped my loom. I have been dreaming of casting something new onto the loom, warping something new. And I've really been wanting to use one of my lingering advent calendars, and I just envisioned something like colorful and stripy, but since I don't really know what I'm doing when it comes to weaving, I decided just to play with it and have fun. And so I did take kind of some photos of the warp when I got it done, as well as my shuttles for what the weft will be. So I warped this using, it came out to just over a skein and some change of ching fiber. This is yarn that I've had in my stash for a while. It's one of those random 2-skeiners that I didn't really know what I wanted to make out of it. Like, it's just not enough for a garment. I could make a shawl out of it, but nothing was really calling to me that yarn. So I thought it would be really cool to use this as a warp with bands of lighter minis from my advent calendars. And then to also then stripe them through the weft, the black of the ching, the charcoal ching, as well as some pops of pastel from the mini skeins. So I am using an advent calendar from 2-ish years ago from Earl Grey Fibers. All the colors in it are inspired by Alice in Wonderland. And so these ones will definitely be going into my shawl or scarf. I think that's roughly what I'm weaving. These ones are also from the advent calendar, and I haven't decided if I want to use them in it or not. We'll see if I even need them, because I warped about 7 feet, give or take. I didn't measure it out because I couldn't be bothered. I just kind of eyeballed it for what I thought I would need to wrap around my neck. Here is the rest of the contrast colors for my wefts. And I'm sorry, I will take some footage of my loom, but I'm not dragging it out here at the moment. Sorry to disappoint. So as you can see, we're starting out with some really light gray neutrals. We do have a pop of pink in here, and I do think I have a more pinky one on a shuttle. I must have not grabbed it, but it's kind of more of like a peachy pink, because I think that's the last color change that I just did for a weft. But yeah, I'm just enjoying having fun with the different colors and seeing how they play with each other on the loom. Like I said, I am still new to this. I've only ever woven one other thing, and so I'm just trying to enjoy the creative process, get a better idea for how like a light and a dark yarn woven on each other, like how that appears. I'm sure there's a technical term for it, but just getting a feel for visually what kind of effect that creates. I eventually would like to learn some like different weave patterns, but I'm not quite ready for that yet. So I just want to keep getting the basic mechanics down and keep like working on getting like nice clean edges and changing colors. Like I'm changing colors a lot, so getting the hang of like tamping down the new and old thread on the shuttle. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'll probably, now that I have the house to myself, I'll probably work on that through the rest of the day, because it'll be a nice meditative, like easy afternoon, which I haven't had in a while. earlier this month. January's been crazy, you guys. I'm like, why don't I have more to show? But I know why. So January's been crazy. We brought home Eve. She had kennel cough. She then passed her cold on to Bing Bong, who got much sicker than Eve. And so dealing with 2 sick doggies at the same time was a lot of fun. The other challenge was like when she was really starting to feel better was kind of when he was at his worst. And so there's a lot of trips to the vet. And then coupled with that, one of my aunts passed away pretty unexpectedly. And so my parents and my sister drove down for the funeral, and not 36 hours into their stay here, my mom came down with COVID. Sorry to be putting your business out there, Mom. And so they turned around and left, which is fine. I mean, good. It was kind of like whiplash. So that's been going on. And then at work, we've had a vacant position since September, but the new person is going to start soon, like tomorrow, from when this is being filmed. So we've been doing a lot to like try and get our offices ready because they replaced the flooring. They're supposed to come and paint. We've got like a new conference table. So my boss and I have been doing a lot to get our offices going. Then at work in February, we are going to be hosting an African American Heritage Celebration, which is great. And in conjunction with that, we are getting a traveling exhibit from the Smithsonian. They have a traveling exhibit program. And within that, we're trying to build out some local history to interweave with their text and interpretive panels. And originally my boss was going to manage all of this. And then last week she sent me a message and was like, can you pull XYZ thing and can you help do this? So last week was like museum CrossFit at work because we were building these temporary wall panels to put up in a gallery space. And neither of us are very fit. So we were like on the floor pushing these like 10 foot tall by like 4 foot wide panels. And they're like a formicable, like a paintable plastic. It wasn't cute. We were both sweating and grunting a lot. But anyways, yeah, so that's been like good and busy and very transitory. So no wonder I don't have brain space for more complicated projects, which is why I think that sweater got done, because I could just come home and it was either knit 3, knit 1 or purl 3, knit 1. And depending on what row I was on, that's all she needed to do. That's all she needed to know. These other ones, much more involved. The other thing is John, my husband, and I have been trying to take advantage of the nice weather this time of year. So this is the time of year where you like go outside and do all of your yard work, because when it's July, you won't catch me outside. So yesterday we went to a local nursery. We got some fresh herbs to pot. We already had some tomatoes going, but we got another tomato. It's an Everglades tomato. So it's like a Florida hybrid. We have been cleaning out the backyard. We have in our backyard, we made this garden border, and for the longest time, John wanted it to be filled with rocks and then have potted plants on top of it. And I originally, when we made it, envisioned like a nice pollinator garden. Finally got him to my side. So we're in the process of right now it's all tarped because it got filled with weeds. So right now it's tarped. We're amending the soil, and then it probably won't be anytime soon, but I imagine this fall, 9 to 10 months from now, that's when we'll be planting all of that stuff, which is fine. It can sit as it is for now. I mean, there's other things we need to do in that area before we're even ready for planting, but just reclaiming it from the weed feature that it was before, and in of itself was a pretty big feat. And so yeah, the other thing we want to do is extend part of our yard for the dogs to play in. So we've been like cleaning out this side yard area because we need to go through the permitting process to get a fence put up. So it's getting there. It's just been busy. It's been a lot of non-fiber related things. So I've really been trying to pick projects that I enjoy for knitting, because I haven't had a whole lot of time for things that, if it's not going to grab me, why am I going to work on it? So yeah, I think I have rambled long enough. I've got a snoring dog at my feet. And yeah, until next time, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you enjoy whatever you're making. I'll talk to you later. Bye. So she was just snoring a second ago, but me taking the phone out of the holder woke her up. But this has been my little podcast buddy the whole time. Evie Bear. Yeah? Where's your brother? You want to go find Bingy? Don't mind this. I just did my yearly wash of all my knits. Hi, Bing Bong. You want to say hi to your fans? Hi, Papa. Hi. Sleepyhead.